Hi, my name's Leo and I'm a boat builder and a sailor, and I'm on a mission to sail this boat, Tally-Ho, back to the UK to compete in the Fastnet race 100 years after she first won it in 1927. In this video we're going to be talking about how we actually physically sail Tally-Ho. I'm going to be explaining what the different lines or ropes do and how we physically manipulate the sails. We're also going to be documenting some engine trouble that we discovered while filming this video. But we're going to start off by showing what it's like to arrive in a foreign Central American country by boat and how the customs and immigration process works. Patrick's here. So going ashore to say hi. And we also need to check in to the country, do customs and immigration. It's Sunday, so we're not sure if the offices will be open. Oh my god! Okay, so when we came ashore yesterday, all the offices were closed, but this morning we're going through the process of officially checking into Costa Rica. Where are we now? What's our first step?
First step is getting our passport stamped, so we're at the immigration office, which is also the police station here. So we're about to go in and get that done. Okay, let's go.
Okay, well the immigration process was pretty smooth once we finally found the right person. They weren't in the office originally, so we had to come back about 4 hours later. And then we had to fill in sort of 3 or 4 forms and get lots of stamps and signatures. And then we were sent on our way. So now that's Marit's part complete. She's checked into the country. So now I am outside the port captain's office. So I have to check the boat into the country. So there'll be some more stamps and some more forms. All right, so the next step, having gone to immigration and the port captain, is to go to customs. However, customs is actually at the airport, which is an hour's drive from the town where the boat is. So I'm on a little road trip, got all my documents, gonna go and get a temporary import permit for the boat. Okay, so I managed to get the temporary import permit for the boat at the airport. There was just another couple of forms, some more signatures, and about a 45-minute wait. And then drove back here to the port captain again. This is the final stage, hopefully, and this is getting the national ZARP, what they call it. So it's the permission to leave this port to go to the next port in the country. I'm also now going to be entering Patrick on the crew list now that he's arrived, and hopefully then this will be it. Hi, it's all done.
It's done?
Yeah.
That's amazing, good job.
Thanks.
Look, they sell cilantro with the roots attached.
That's nice.
So... Wow, dude.
Welcome aboard, buddy.
Since I did that. Oh, thanks, bud.
Patty! Also known as Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Carrying his big bag of presents.
So Leo texted me before I bought my ticket to come to Costa Rica, and he said, "Yeah, come on out, it'll be great. By the way, get any room in your suitcase for just a couple things. This is a Christmas present for Marit, from Marit's mom.
From my mom?
Some stuff from Bob. I don't know what these are, but that's a lie. I know exactly what they are.
Yep. Hedge pump rebuild kit, just in case.
Spectre Water Makers Alkaline Cleaning Compound.
Does what it says on the tin.
And we got some chafe here.
Oh yeah.
Oh, look at it's the handle.
Oh, that's special.
Handle for the fridge, which brings me to the next deal.
Oh.
Wow.
This is going to be your door
Oh, look at that.
to the fridge.
Isn't that nice? That looks
This
great,
used to
Patty.
look like this?
Yeah.
Was I here for that entire transition and didn't notice?
Yeah.
Wow.
So now we're going to talk about what it actually takes to physically sail this boat and this rig, what the different lines do, how the rig works, and what we have to actually physically do in order to get off the anchor and get sailing. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the bobstay. The bobstay is the chain that goes from the end of the bowsprit down to the stem of tally-ho near the waterline, and it basically holds the bowsprit down. And in conjunction with the forestays and the jib stays, that also holds the mast up. It holds the whole rig up really, because those forces are pulling the bowsprit up. So if the bowsprit didn't have anything holding it down, it could eventually bend and snap, and then the whole rig could collapse. Now at the top of the chain we've got a kind of deadeye and lanyard setup. Deadeyes are the blocks with 3 holes in, and the lanyard is in this case a piece of Dyneema modern fiber rope. So that allows us to adjust the tension on the bobstay, and because it's a multi-part purchase, it gives us a lot more purchase or strength to pull in and put a lot of tension on that chain if we want to. Now when we're at anchor, we often take all the tension off the bobstay by letting that line all the way out and trice it up. Now, tricing up the bobstay involves a different line that goes through one of the chain links, and when we pull that up, it kind of folds the chain up in the middle. And the reason we do that is so that the anchor chain, which is coming out of the bow roller here on the port side, doesn't hit the bobstay and kind of jump up and down it as tally-ho swings a little bit on her anchor, because when that happens it makes a lot of noise and it keeps people up at night, and also it's probably not great for the bobstay, the rig. I mean, it's fine, but it could be wearing the galvanizing off the chain and that kind of thing.
Wicked wow! It spins both ways.
So if we're going from being anchored to sailing, one of the first things we do, usually before we even raise the anchor, is tension up the bobstay again. So we let off the tricing line and pull in the line that tensions the bobstay, and because the deadeyes have quite a lot of friction on them, it's actually hard to get really good tension by hand, and so what we often do is take it and put it on the capstan drum, and then either using the handles or using the electric motor, if it's on already, we tension it up that way. And then somebody lets it off the drum, and somebody else very quickly, without losing too much tension, gets it on the cleat on the after side of the stem there. And it's possible to do that without losing too much tension, again because there's quite a lot of friction in those deadeyes, so that line doesn't ease through there too quickly. If you've got a little bit of hand tension on it, you can maintain that tension that you got with the winch. Once the bobstay is tensioned, we'll pull the anchor up, and in a normal anchorage we might have around 90 feet of chain out. We can do it by hand, which we sometimes do, or we often use the electric motor. Somebody will be operating the motor and keeping an eye on the chain. If we have enough crew, somebody else will be spraying down the chain with our deck wash pump hose. So that is salt water that's being sprayed on, and that's just to clear off any sand and mud so it doesn't all get in the chain locker. If we're short-handed, one person can do both of those jobs. Now, before we can actually think about hoisting any sails, we have to get the sails and the sheets ready. And that may happen before or after hoisting the anchor up. But it basically involves maybe getting the sails out from down below, getting them out of their bags, attaching them to the stays that they're going to run up. Or it might just mean taking the covers off. It could mean taking the mainsail cover off, and also means running the sheets and making sure the other lines are clear to go. Now, there's a lot of terminology which some people here will be familiar with and some won't, but I think most of it will become clear as we keep talking about it. The sheets of a sail are the lines that attach to the clew. The clew is the aft corner of the sail, and the sheets are the main way that we control the trim of the sail, that is how tight or how loose it is once the sail has already been hoisted. So these are the jib sheets because they're attached to the clew of the jib. The jib is the sail in the middle of our 3 head sails. This after one is called the staysail. So these are the jib sheets, and we have to run these before we can hoist the jib, and so that means uncoiling them here and then running them through various deck blocks, which will control their angle and make sure they go back to the winches with a fair lead. And so we have to make sure we're leading these sheets correctly around various things, through various things, to make sure that when the sail is up and under tension, those sheets can run freely.
So it was good to flake out your sheets before you run them.
You got lucky that time, Paddy.
I did not.
Now the staysail here you can see is rolled up right now, so that would be unrolled, the sheets would be attached, the halyard would also be attached because when we're anchored, the staysail halyard is used to hoist the anchor light, so that would be brought down, the halyard goes on here, and again these staysail sheets would go through their designated deck blocks and back to the cockpit where we can control the trim of the sail after it's hoisted. Once the sheets have been led, we'll tie a figure-8 knot on the end of each sheet in the cockpit, and that is called a stopper knot, and it just stops the sheet from running back through the block and kind of getting lost back into the foredeck when the sail might be flapping around or something. We also have to get the mainsail ready. So first of all, we'll take the awning down if it's up, we'll take the mainsail cover off, we'll take off the sail ties, which just kind of keep it as a nice neat bundle when we're not using it. And we'll let these lines off. I'll get into what these do in more detail later, but roughly this is a gaff vang that controls the top end of the gaff when the sail's up. We have only been using these recently and we only use them in certain situations, but there's one on each side. And this is the topsail sheet, which we use when we hoist the topsail. So I'll talk about that a little bit later when we do that. But these need to be taken off to allow the sail to actually be hoisted. We'll also ease the topping lift. Now the topping lift is the line that holds up the boom and most of the sail, the weight of the sail, when the sail's not up itself. So obviously when the sail's up, the halyards are holding it all up in place, and the actual sail itself is holding the boom and stopping the boom from crashing down on deck. But when the sail's down, we need different lines to keep the boom suspended and off the deck, and those are called topping lifts. And we've got 2 topping lifts. On the gaffer you generally have 1 topping lift on each side of the boom so that the gaff can go in the middle, and these are controlled here, and they're on a multi-part purchase because this is all very heavy. So the purchase allows you to be able to more or less hoist the boom by hand, but even with the purchase it's quite heavy. But when we hoist sail, we ease the topping lifts, and that drops the boom down, and we have a mark on the topping lifts to show the correct position where we want them to be for hoisting the sail.
All right, easing.
The reason we adjust them at all is just to get the boom out of the way when we're not sailing, because in its sailing position, if we left the topping lifts all the time, the boom would be very low, and you'd hit your head on it every time you came out of the companionway or trying to move around the cockpit at anchor. So that's why we lift the boom with the topping lifts when we're not sailing, and then before we hoist the sail we drop it down to the correct position for sailing. So at this stage we'd finally be ready to start hoisting sails, and we generally start by hoisting the main. And any mainsail that is attached to a mast, it's generally much easier to hoist and drop it when the boat is facing into the wind. So we'd maneuver the boat to be facing into the wind first of all, and then we'd pull on the halyards. Now the halyards are the lines that hoist the sail from the top, and most sails only have 1 halyard, but gaff sails usually have 2 halyards. A throat halyard, which hoists the forward end of the gaff, the throat, and a peak halyard that hoists the aft end of the gaff, the peak. Now obviously on a traditional boat like this there's a lot of different lines going up the mast, and they all kind of look the same, so it can be a little tricky to get to know which lines are what. You can look up and try and figure it out, but when you're trying to do things fast you kind of need to just know what they are. So each line is always made off on a specific pin, so I know right away that this line is the staysail halyard, for example. Now it was made a little bit more difficult because for a while I was moving them around quite a lot to find positions where these lines wouldn't be chafing on each other when the sails were up, when the sails were down, in various different situations. But I'm now, I think, pretty happy where everything is. So these positions are semi-permanent at least. So the throat halyard for the mainsail always lives on this pin, the forwardmost pin on the port side. And if I pull that, you can see the throat halyard going up. Now this is also on a multi-part purchase. So for every 2 feet I pull down on this, the sail actually only goes up less than a foot. And that of course makes this halyard easier to hoist. There's a lot more line to pull through, but there's less weight on the line. So instead of needing sort of 5 or 6 people to hoist this heavy piece of wood and the heavy sail, we can do it with just 1 or 2. So the throat halyard here and the peak halyard, which is on this fife rail on the other side of the mast, they get hoisted in unison. So the gaff goes up, and we try and hoist them at such a rate that the gaff stays horizontal until the throat halyard is tight, and only then do we continue to hoist the peak. The reason for that is if the peak is up like this, there's a lot more weight on the throat halyard, makes it much harder to hoist. So we keep the gaff horizontal. Now as this sail gets hoisted higher and higher, it gets harder and harder to pull the halyards because there's more and more weight being suspended as the sail goes up. And so at some point it might get too hard to just pull these halyards like this. And so we use a technique called sweating. Now you'll see a lot of these heavier halyards run around these deck hooks, or sway hooks we call them, in the deck. And part of their purpose is to help with sweating lines, although you can actually just sweat lines around the underside of the pin. But anyway, to sweat a line, you basically lean back on it. So you can do it this way or this way. Lean back on it, and because you're pulling at an angle, you can actually pull more tension this way than you could if you're just pulling directly down. So you sweat it, and then you pull it down as you come back in, and the other person has the end of the line. They have a little turn on a pin, so there's a bit of friction but not too much, and so as you come back down they take up the slack, and that's called tailing. So it's generally a 2-person job, 1 person sweating, the other person tailing. You can sweat and tail on your own, it's not as effective and it's a bit awkward.
Nice. Gorgeous. One more of those, hell yeah.
Yeah, one more.
Got one more?
Yeah.
So that is a technique we'd use to get this hoisted all the way. However, in certain conditions, in strong wind, we might want to put even more tension on this halyard to really tension up the luff that is the forward edge of this sail. And we might want more tension on there than we can actually achieve through sweating. So there is another way. Now, this halyard goes up, goes through a block at the top of the mast, through this block, back up, back down, back up, and then it continues down on the other side of the boat. So you can see up here in the rig the upper throat block. So this is where all those lines go. They go up through these blocks and back down again. And this block's pretty clever. It's a single block underneath a double block. So it's essentially a triple block, but it's done in such a way that it's a bit more standardized. So if either of these break, we've got spare double block shells and single block shells. Whereas if we had to have a triple block here, which is essentially what this is, it would be a unique part, so a little bit harder to carry spares. Also, this is hanging from the throat crane. Now this is a piece of bronze hardware that we made at Port Townsend Foundry, but we designed it from the original drawings and photos of the original, which would have been made probably in wrought iron, but it's a cool detail. It's sort of quite unusual. I've never seen this shape of throat crane on a boat before. So anyway, the halyard comes up from the port side, that's the main part, but it doesn't get dead-ended up here at all. The other end of it just goes down on the starboard side of the deck. But as the end of the halyard comes down on this side of the boat, it doesn't just come down directly as one part or one rope. It actually is attached to another block and tackle, or block and tackle, some people say, another purchase system. So it's attached to another block up there, and then there's a separate line which goes through that block and through this block. So this gives me even more mechanical advantage and mechanical purchase than the halyard on the port side does. So pulling down on the port side, this is going to be a 4-to-1 purchase. So say I'm pulling down with a force of 50 pounds, I'm actually lifting this up with a force of 200 pounds, minus the friction of the blocks and so on. But that's theoretical. Now this is a 3-to-1 purchase. So I'm then pulling that 4-to-1 purchase with a 3-to-1 purchase. So 4 times 3 is 12. So pulling on this, I get a 12-to-1 mechanical advantage. So theoretically, at least, if I'm pulling 50 pounds here, then I'm pulling 600 pounds of lift on here. Of course, there's a lot of friction, so it wouldn't be quite that. But you can see, pulling this, you can pull quite a lot of line, and you just get only a small amount of lift here. So this gives a really great mechanical advantage for when we want to get a lot of tension on the luff of the sail. Now this system is called a jigger. So you've got the main part of the halyard over there, and then you've got the jigger on the other side of the mast. And we've got we've got 3 jiggers on board. So the throat halyard has a jigger, the peak halyard has a jigger, and the jib halyard also has a jigger. And so that's how we get those high tension sails nice and tight. Now the mainsail is hoisted, and we can think about hoisting head sails. And we can also come off the wind a little bit now if we want to, because you don't have to be head to wind to hoist head sails, although we usually would hoist the jib before bearing away. Now the head sail halyards are fairly simple. The staysail halyard is just on a 2-to-1 purchase, so the line just goes up from deck, through a block, through another block at the staysail head, and then back up, and it's dead-ended at the mast. The jib halyard is very similar, except after it goes back up to the mast, it also comes down again on the other side, kind of like the throat and the peak halyards. So on the main part of the jib halyard, you've got a 2-to-1 purchase, but the jib halyard jigger gives an additional 2-to-1, so you're getting 4-to-1 purchase to get an extra bit of luff tension on the jib if you need it. However, if we look at the bottom of the jib and the bowsprit, there's a bit more going on. It's a bit more complicated. First off, the jib is attached to the traveller, which is a metal ring that slides in and out on the bowsprit. And so we have a line to control that metal ring. We have an out haul, which is down here. And we pull that, and it pulls the metal ring out to the end of the bowsprit. And then we have a sort of down haul, in haul, which pulls the jib down, but it also pulls the traveller back towards the stem, back aft into the boat. Now this next part gets a little more complicated, but I want to start by explaining the difference between a shroud and a stay. So there's both parts of the standing rig. That is the kind of permanent rigging that holds up the mast at all times. And so shrouds are the wires usually, although in this case they're made of Dyneema, but they're the kind of rigging that holds up the mast from either side. So you have the port shrouds and the starboard shrouds, and there's topmast shrouds and lower shrouds and so on, depending on where they terminate on the mast and where they terminate on the boat. So those are shrouds. Stays serve a similar purpose. They hold the rig up, they hold the mast up, but they are situated in front of or behind the mast. So you have forestays and backstays. And so they stop the mast from falling down in a forwards or backwards direction. Now, generally speaking, most shrouds and stays are fixed in that you can adjust the tension, but they generally stay in one place. However, that's not always the case. So on this boat, because the boom overhangs the stern of the boat, we can't have a fixed backstay in the middle of the stern like you would on many modern Bermuda rig boats. So we have running backstays. So we have one on each side of the boat, and you tension one or other of them to support the mast in that direction, depending on which side of the boat the boom is out on. So if you're on starboard tack, the wind is coming from the starboard, the boom is out to port, and so you then have the starboard running backstay tensioned to hold the rig up. Now, forward stays are often fixed, but in our case we have 3 stays. One of them, the forestay, which is this innermost one, is where the staysail goes. This is fixed. We can adjust the tension, but it's always there, and that's the main one that holds the lower mast up. But our other 2 stays are not fixed, they're running. So the second one out in the middle is called the jib stay, because it's the stay that the jib attaches to and runs up, and that goes up to the top of the lower mast and down to the end of the bowsprit. And the furthest forward stay is called the topmast stay, because it goes from the end of the bowsprit all the way to the very top of the topmast, and that supports the topmast, and it's also what we attach the flying jib or the jib topsail to. So those are the 2 running stays, and so the jib stay comes back to the boat on the traveller when we bring that in. and that allows us to, if we're changing head sails, it allows us to hank on, attach the new head sail to the stay without climbing out onto the bowsprit. And the end of the stay actually goes through a block on the traveller and is then attached to the tack of the sail, so that when we tension the jib halyard, we're actually also tensioning the jib stay at the same time. Now I know that's a bit hard to get your head around probably. Hopefully the diagrams might help a little bit, but don't worry if you don't get that. All you really need to know is it's a system which allows us to change the head sails on the foredeck rather than climbing out to the end of the bowsprit. And to control it, we use our traveller outhaul to pull the traveller ring out, and we use our downhaul / inhaul to pull the sail down and pull the traveller back into the boat. Now the furthest forward stay, the topmast stay, works in a slightly different way, but it's still running. It works on a dedicated downhaul for the stay, which is also made off on the bits or the Samson posts. And so when we relieve that, the bottom of the topmast stay comes inboard, and again we can hank on or attach our jib topsail to that stay without getting out on the bowsprit, and then we use that downhaul to pull it back out and tension it. In any case, the traveller will be hauled out, the jib will be hoisted, we'll put tension on the jib halyard to make sure we got a nice tight luff on that sail, and then after that is made off securely, then we would adjust the sheets and start bringing the trim in to let the sail fill. And then we do pretty much the same thing with the staysail. We hoist it first, make that off, and then start adjusting the seats. And at this point, we now have our 3 lower sails. We call this our working sail plan, our jib, staysail, and mainsail, and we can operate the boat pretty well like this. But in lighter airs, we're also going to want to hoist a topsail. Now I just mentioned running backstays, and so I just want to point them out. Obviously right now we've got an awning up as I'm explaining this because we need the shade, which is sort of obscuring it a little bit because it's actually tied to the running backstay. But this is it. Above this point there's 2 very strong Dyneema lines that go up. One goes to the top of the lower mast and the other one goes to the top of the topmast. So these running backstays actually support both the lower mast and the topmast. This is just the excess line that I've tied up to get it off the deck. But this is a 2-part purchase, so it's a 2-to-1 purchase, which is dead-ended on the deck, comes through here, through another block, and then to this winch. So right now this is tensioned, and when we're sailing, only one of these will generally be tensioned, if at all. And so if the boom is out this way, then the other one will be tensioned and this one will be let off. So we can slack it off by taking it off the winch, letting the tension off, and then typically we actually pull the slack through the block or overhaul the block and pull the block and the lines forward so they're out of the way of the boom. So when you're tacking or jibing the boat, moving the bow or the stern through the wind, you're also, as well as changing the sheets of the head sails and maybe adjusting the main sheet, you're also swapping over the running backstays, tightening one up, putting it on the winch and letting the other one off. Okay, so now the main is up, the jib and the staysail are up, we're sailing around, but there's not enough wind, we need some more sail area, so we're going to hoist some topsails. So we got the jib topsail, which we kind of already talked about. It goes out on the topmast stay. That's pretty simple. But we've also got our gaff topsails. So there's our kind of working gaff topsail, which fills the gap between the gaff when the mainsail is hoisted and the topmast. There's a kind of big triangle. The topsail fills that gap. We've also got a jackyard topsail, which goes up with its own spars and extends even beyond the end of the gaff and the top of the topmast. But we're not going to talk about that too much because it hoists basically the same as a working topsail, except with some more complicated knots, and it's more difficult to actually get up there without catching anything. But in terms of our working topsail, First of all, we'd get the sail up on deck, get it out of its bag, locate the three corners. We've got the head as the top, the tack is the bottom, and the clew is where the sheet attaches. That goes out to the end of the gaff when it's up there. And we're going to find the appropriate lines to tie to the different corners. So we'll start with the halyard, which is made off over here when it's not in use. So this will get tied to the head of the sail. And I'll actually tie this with a buntlin hitch, which is quite a nice knot. It's very secure, very simple. It's just 2 half hitches, but sort of the opposite way around than you would normally expect to tie them. And that makes it a little bit more secure because this one is kind of caught underneath the other one. But the nice thing about this knot over a bowline for this application is this knot doesn't take up much space, because we want to hoist this sail to the very, very top so that this knot is right up against the sheave or the shiv. So if the knot itself takes up some room, that means we can't hoist the sail as high, and that means it's not going to be quite as effective and not going to set quite so well. Next, we're going to set up the topsail tack line. Now that's just a very simple coil of line that'll be in the topsail bag, and we just tie it on one end to the tack of the sail. The other end is just left hanging. Once the sail is hoisted, we'll then pull down on it to tension the tack and tension the luff of that sail and tie that off on one of these eyes. Now next is going to be the topsail sheet, which is here, and this is a little more interesting. So I've got 2 parts of the sheet here. This is the same line. You can see I'm pulling it through, and so this line goes from this end through this fair lead, which is attached to the gaff saddle. So this fair lead will go up with the gaff and be quite high up there, and then after that it goes along the gaff and then through what we call a cheek block, which is a kind of block screwed to the side of the gaff essentially, and then it'll come down from that cheek block directly to deck. It actually comes out of the top side of the cheek block and down to deck, which sort of makes sense where once you see the sail up and in position. So the gaff is up. We've got both ends of this line down here. So this end we would tie to the clew of the sail, and then we'd hoist the sail. So we'd hoist it using the halyard, that would pull up the head of the sail, but we'd also hoist it using the sheet, which would be pulling up the clew of the sail. So hoisting both those parts in unison, and then once the halyard reaches full hoist, so the sail gets to the very top of the topmast, we make the halyard off, then we pull down on the tack line to tension the luff, and then we can haul on the sheet, and that pulls the clew of the sail out and makes it into that much nicer shape. There is one other element of the topsail which I didn't talk about, which is this. It's called a knock line, or the knock, and it goes through a grommet, a hole in the luff of the topsail, and that just helps to keep the luff of the topsail forward and against the topmast. And we actually leave this slack as the topsail's going up, and then once it's up we tension this, and again that just pulls the luff in to the topmast. So we have to make sure we set that up properly, as well as tying in the 3 corners, and we have to make sure all our leads are fair, so all the sheets and halyards are all going up through the same gap, and the sail's not going to get fouled on its way up. So we put all our sails up, and we were planning to go for a long sail today to a different area, but as we were using the engine just very slowly around the anchorage, I started hearing some weird noises and went down to investigate, and it looks like there's something could be seriously wrong with one of our hybrid motors. So we're just having a little sail around the bay here instead. And then we're gonna sail up to a little anchorage and anchor, so I can have a proper look at the engine, try and figure out what's going on there before we go anywhere too far away.
He's right.
So we're gonna anchor under sail, should be fun. Okay, so we managed to get anchored safely under sail. Now I'm going to have a closer look at this one electric motor, part of the hybrid system, because what I saw was that the sort of spindle on the wheel, or the cog that comes out of one of these motors, was moving around in a pretty worrying way. So I'm going to take the belt off and have a closer look and see if I can see what's going on. Okay, well, it's fairly obvious roughly what's going on here. These are the two motors. This wheel that the belt goes on this motor turns smoothly. I can feel the magnets in there as I turn it, and there's no play in it. That's how it should be. This motor is a different story. It's very kind of grindy in there. I don't really feel the magnets. It's a very uneven, grindy sensation, and there's play in it. I can actually move this at some positions in a way. God, it's getting harder. Anyway, there's something going on in there. There's play in the wheel. Something inside the motor has gone badly wrong, and so obviously that means we can't run it, which means we can't generate electricity. So I guess we're going to take the motor out and try and take it apart and see if there's any way we can fix it, but it seems like it might be kind of unlikely. The other option, of course, is to try and get a replacement motor shipped out here. Unfortunately, it's New Year's Eve today, so there's no way I'm going to be able to get hold of anyone that can help with getting a replacement motor for probably a few days. We might be able to maybe jury rig it so that we can run just this motor with the belt to make electricity, but I know that this is the secondary motor, this is the master, so this is the one where all the programming happens, so I'm not sure if it'll work to run it only on this one, even if we can make the belt work. So, you know, obviously we can survive without electricity, but and you know, our very essential systems are 12 volts, which we can make from the engine alternator, but without this electricity we can't cook, or and our freezer won't work, and a few other things, so we really get to figure out a way around this. Okay, so I have managed to speak now to the people at Hybrid Marine, even though it's a holiday, and they have been extremely supportive and helpful. And I'm pretty shocked to hear that one of the motors failed so soon. And they did confirm, unfortunately, that they don't think it's going to be possible to repair this existing motor without a huge amount of work. However, they are going to provide me with a free of charge new motor. Now, it can't really come off the shelf because they have to make some modifications to it, so it has to come from England, and it's going to take a couple of weeks for me to be able to pick it up in Panama or somewhere like that. So we're going to have to make do for a little while. Now, we could just run off 12 volts like I was talking about, but it would be really nice to be able to you know, have stuff in the freezer and be able to cook. So the plan now is to try and find a shorter belt so we can charge our batteries and run off just one of the electric motors. Unfortunately, it is quite a difficult belt to find, and it is still a holiday here in Costa Rica, so I'm not quite sure how we're going to manage to do that, but hopefully by the time you see this video we will have found a solution and be on our way. Now, I hope you enjoyed the technical rig content. I should say that there are many different ways of rigging a traditional boat like this. There are many different ways of describing the rig, and there are many different ways of sailing a boat like this. So I don't claim that the way I've shown and explained it is the correct way. It's one of the ways, and also it's quite possible I got a few of the minutiae details wrong. I'm not a professional rigger. I have been a professional sailor, and I do know this rig pretty well now. But there are, of course, many ways to do things. Anyway, for now, thanks a lot for watching, and a massive, massive thank you to everyone who has donated or otherwise supported this project. It does make a huge difference. It means you're able to keep on sailing and maintaining this boat, and it means you're able to keep on making these videos. So I really, really appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Cheers.